Okay, so we're going to just record audio?
No.
Oh, I still.
You are
Very small camera. Great. So, beginning? Okay, well, thanks so much for having me. I am Daniel Nazer, for those who are watching the recording. Soy un abogado de EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, en San Francisco. Somos una ONG. Y voy a hablar en inglés la mayoría de esta presentación porque mi español no alcanza a los temas que voy a hablar. Okay, inglés. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, people here, I think you know us, but we're a nonprofit in California. We have about 40,000 paid members. Most of our funding comes from individual donors. We're almost 100 staff members now, based in San Francisco, and we work on a lot of issues relating to digital policy, including freedom of expression, privacy, surveillance, and intellectual property policy. And my title at EFF is I'm a senior staff attorney, and I am the Mark Cuban Chair to Eliminate Stupid Patents. If you want to show the second slide there that you guys can look at. So and Mark Cuban, who funded the Mark Cuban Chair to Eliminate Stupid Patents. He is an investor in a lot of companies, and he has had a lot of his companies hit with very silly patents. For example, one of his companies is a movie distribution company. And that company was sued by a patent on the idea of distributing movies to mobile devices. And this patent, it didn't invent mobile devices, it didn't invent wireless transmission. It was just people that said, use these devices for the very things they were designed to do. And you get a patent on it. It was a patent lawyer that invented this patent, not someone with any kind of technological background. And this is the problem that small startups are facing in the United States with really, really low quality patents on basic methods of using technology. And then this is getting owned by people who are shaking down the real innovators for money. So that's sort of the big level background on and why there is a chair to eliminate stupid patents at EFF. Our broader IP work, we work a lot on copyright. Perhaps our biggest victory in the past few months has been in a case where we represent Carl Malamud. I don't know if you know Carl. He has a nonprofit called Public Resource that is devoted to getting government and public information, what he considers to be public information, as widely available to the public as possible. And he has been publishing the rules for how for example, housing codes they're published by by the organizations that are themselves nonprofits, and then these nonprofits claim a copyright in the codes, and then the codes get incorporated into law. So it is the law that you have to build your house following this code. So the code kind of gets written by a nonprofit, and then the cities or the states say our law is this housing code, but the housing code is still protected by copyright. So you have to buy the law, exactly.
So it becomes like a standard.
It is
It's like a standard.
Exactly.
Doesn't it look
Exactly.
like what ISO does? I don't know.
Very similar kind of
ISO.
stuff. Exactly. It's very, very similar kind of stuff.
It becomes the standard, but you have to pay to do something.
Exactly. And so Carl has been publishing it on his website, and he got sued by all the standard setting organizations, big litigation. And so we represented Carl with a law firm. And that has been probably our biggest case in terms of work. I didn't work on it, thankfully. But we lost in the district court quite badly. And then we went to appeal at the DC Circuit. And it was kind of a mixed result, but it was a reversal. And a very good, lots of very good language for us, suggesting that because it is law, publishing it should at least be fair use. And we work generally on fair use and lots of copyright issues. My focus has been patents and the right of publicity. I think in Spanish it's derecho de publicidad. That is
Privacidad, imagen.
Exacto.
Derecho de publicidad.
Sí,
No, yo creo que
imagen.
tiene que ver es con el derecho que en la patente, el derecho a que se publique la información.
No, es derecho
No,
de
propia
propia
imagen.
imagen.
Ok.
Como los de los celebrities.
Ok, entonces.
And that is a very interesting area that I like because it's just the cases are really fun and it's a very interesting interaction between the First Amendment and free speech in the United States and the rights. So one case, it's also an area where we are on the same side as the big movie studios. So the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association, Academy. I should know what the MPAA stands for, but anyway, the big movie companies and EFF are on the same side in this issue because they also want the freedom to be able to make, for example, biopics. So a recent case was an old actress, Olivia de Havilland, who was in Gone with the Wind, the original Gone with the Wind. She's still alive. She's 101. And there was a TV series called Feud, a quite high quality show about the rivalry between Joan Crawford and I forget. And Olivia de Havilland was a friend of these people, so she is represented. She's played by Michael Douglas's wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones. So very, like who would not want to be represented by Catherine Zeta-Jones? But she sued FX, saying that they need to pay her to represent her because of this right of publicity. So we filed an amicus brief on that, and that she ended up losing at the appeal. She won at the trial level and lost at the appeal level. And then on our work on patents, we basically we do a lot of amicus briefs. I have no idea how you would say amicus briefs in Colombia.
No,
Just like that.
we use the same Latin way of
Amicus y brief, escrito, or qué?
sí.
Yeah, it's
But we
like
say the same.
it's sometimes we call it something like opinions or whatever. It's amicus brief. It's
And
At least lawyers
¿se
understand.
puede hacerlo aquí también?
Yes.
Sí.
So that is a big part of our work in the patent law. It's not many here. In patent law, there is one appeals court in the U.S. I remember all patent appeals go to the federal circuit, and so it's unlike copyright in the U.S. If you have a case in Illinois, a copyright case, the appeal will go to the Seventh Circuit, and then that appeal goes to the Supreme Court. If you're in California, your appeal goes to the Ninth Circuit, and that appeal, so it's like this multi-structure, but patents, it's the only area of law, in all of American law, that has its own special intermediate appeals court. So there's one court that has a lot of power. It's very unusual and unique, and I think a very bad system. But because it has created a court that becomes more powerful the more powerful patents are. And I don't think this is like an intentional bias, but
Where
it
is
is a
it?
court. It's in D.C., right next to the White House. I don't think this is an intentional bias, but because the judges, they spend all their time talking to patent lawyers, they only think about patent law, their own influence is much greater if patents are stronger. So there's just this natural accretion of power there that I think led to patent law becoming really extreme through the 90s in favor of patentability and the Supreme. So there's been an ongoing dynamic of the Supreme Court overruling the Federal Circuit in patent law and making patents weaker and not as easy to enforce. And the really, really big case happened a few years now, so it often gets kind of forgotten in patent policy discussions, is the eBay v. Merck Exchange case from 2006 that held that you don't get an automatic injunction if you win a patent case. You still can get an injunction, but you have to meet various standards. But if you got an automatic injunction, that gives patents enormous power, particularly when you have, an iPhone that might have 50,000 patents that read on the iPhone. If every 50,000 patent owner has the chance of saying to Apple, okay, you have to pay me X amount or I will stop you being able to sell iPhones, it's an enormous power balance. And so that happened in 2006, and then there have been a number of other decisions. We also do direct representation. We do some patent litigation, tends to be very big and expensive, so we don't do a lot of patent cases. But we have done one in the district court that we won very quickly, so which we thought we would. So, which was fun. That was against a photographer. She had a website where she ran a website where you vote for your favorite photos, and someone had a patent on the idea of voting for things online. Okay. Her website was 5 years older than the patent. So the person had applied for this patent, and then it was 5 years older than the application for the patent. Okay. Years after she had been running this website. Hobby website.
That was easy.
Yeah. And also it was invalid under this case Alice v. CLS Bank as an abstract software patent. But the dynamic is she was an ordinary person. This was just a hobby website, not a business. So they were asking for $50,000 US. And to defend herself, it would cost easily $100,000 even to win. Even though we won very quickly, if we had been charging regular fees, probably would have cost her about $70,000. So that's why they can ask for $50,000. And in the US, even if you win, you don't automatically get your fees. We tried to get the fees, and we didn't. We lost that motion. So we didn't charge her, but we tried to get the fees anyway. But that's why the dynamic of patent trolling is so powerful in America, because you can sue and then just say, Carolina, I would like $50,000, please. And you say, but your patent is invalid. I've been doing it for years before you even filed. I'll say, well, fine, defend yourself then. And you're going to have to pay.
So probably
you end up coming down to like $20,000, $25,000 and just pay. And that's the standard. One of the big patent trolls we've been fighting with for years finally declared bankruptcy 2 months ago. But they had been litigating for 10 years. They filed more than 500 cases, and they made over $15 million. And the patent
why are they declaring bankruptcy now?
Because too many people started to fight back, and in some cases, defendants finally got fees. And so now, when they file a case, there's the precedent that the judges know. There are cases where judges have said, this is abusive litigation, I'm going to give fees to the other side. And so they don't have the leverage that they used to have. But it took years to achieve that. They made a lot of money in Germany. So we do some direct representation. We do comments to the patent office. There is a new director of the Patent Office in the United States who has been very, very strong in saying that all the recent reforms are bad and terrible and patents have been weakened, and so I think we are going to go back to the bad old days in America. And we also work on legislative advocacy, trying to get good legislation, stop bad legislation. In America, we are what's called a 501c3 nonprofit, so we can't. There are legal limits on how much of that we can do. That I think is actually appropriate. I think it's correct that a 501c3, a tax-deductible nonprofit, should only be able to do a small percentage of its work on legislative advocacy. But so we have to keep track of how much we do. Make sure it's not too much, but we do some of that as well. In June of this year, I flew to Washington and met with staff from Senate offices to talk about patent legislation. And so, if we look at the slides, I should just quickly give you, there's a slide with a list of cases. It's slide 18. And so, in the last 10 years, there's been, for people like EFF who think that there needed to be more balance in the patent system, that it had become too easy to get a patent and too easy to enforce a patent. There were a lot of reforms. So there was that eBay case I mentioned, and make it harder to get injunctions. There was a case in 2007 that made it a bit easier to show that a patent was obvious. Faithfully. So it has become too easy to get a patent again. And then the American Invents Act was a law 7 years ago now, that when it passed, we actually didn't think it was going to be that big a reform, but it created a new process called inter partes review, which is a system in the patent office that allows you to challenge patents administratively. And it has turned out to be much more powerful than expected. And so a lot of the very weak patents are getting invalidated there, and it's cheaper than in litigation. It only costs about $250,000 US to invalidate a patent. In the application fee, just the fee to file an inter partes review, is $25,000 US. So at EFF we did this once. It was a patent on podcasting that was being used to sue podcasters. So it got a lot of attention, and we did a fundraiser to raise money for the application fee, and the application fee is $25,000 US. And so we did this fundraiser, and we raised $75,000 in one day. People love podcasting. Yeah, we had to tell people to stop giving us private patents. People really love podcasting, and they love the podcast. Some of the podcasters that got sued threatened were very high profile, and so they were able to use their network. And then we had a firm that represented us for free. We got an expert. You need an expert in these things, and that's quite expensive. It's like $400, $500 US an hour. But our expert was very good. I think he did not charge us too much. I mean, still.
It was a lot of money, but not that much.
Yeah, and he was great. Very, very good expert from MIT's Media Lab, and really helped us prove that this was technology that already existed. The patent's priority date was 1996, so we needed very early internet technology to show that it was invalid. That's why our expert had been at the MIT at that time, And we ended up using a master's thesis from MIT. A student's thesis was what we used to invalidate the patent. And we won that case and went on appeal to the Federal Circuit, and we won there, and then they appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court gets to decide whether it takes cases, and said no. So that was a multi-year effort to invalidate one patent. And we say that inter-partes review is cheaper.
Okay.
If we had been paying our law firm, we did a lot of the work ourselves, but it's usually about $250,000. But that's cheaper than district court litigation in America, which to go all the way through and invalidate a patent, you're talking $1 million.
How much?
$1 million.
$1 million?
$1 million can be even $2 to $5 million. I've worked on patent cases when I was in private practice, where the defense team, we spent more than $10 million on one patent.
For me, that is a crazy
It's settled.
world.
Yeah.
I think it shouldn't exist.
Yeah, they were
I
asking.
so much.
Yeah, they were the other side were in that case. This is all public. They were asking for $4 billion,
Oh my God.
and we settled. At the time, it was confidential, but subsequently, it has come out publicly in other litigation. So now I can tell you, we settled for $240 million. So
245.
for $240 million.
Plus the 10 million that you spent in the...
Yeah. So quarter of $1 billion.
And this peer review was the one that was under questioning by all states case?
That is exactly right, yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so it was recently challenged under the constitutionally whether an administrative agency, they were arguing the United States Constitution, the courts, it's Article 3 of the Constitution describes what the courts do, and the argument was that inter partes review was doing something that is an Article 3 power, and thus is not valid, because the inter partes review is part of the Patent Office, which is part of the executive branch under the power of the president, in theory. And so there was then the question about whether administrative courts could have the power to invalidate patents, and Supreme Court 7-2, or was it 7-1? 7-2. I forget. I shouldn't. But it was a pretty clear victory that it was upheld. So there is another case the Supreme Court just accepted that asks whether the government itself can file an inter partes review petition.
Okay.
And that potentially could raise, the government does not do that very often. Almost all the petitions are private. But that itself could raise more complex constitutional issues. So I think it is very likely that inter partes review will survive, but there are constitutional issues that are still alive.
There are very interesting issues, constitutional issues. I mean,
yes.
And some of them they're being discussed here in Colombia also sometimes, yes, about whether intellectual property, whether patents or copyrights, mm-hmm, or whatever, mm-hmm, is a kind of a property right, mm-hmm, or if it's something that could an administrative branch, yes, could invalidate, yeah, or could question or limit in
whether it's
somehow
an exclusive right or not.
Yeah, and the question is if it should be a judge, the one that does all of this.
Yeah.
Different from the US,
mm-hmm,
the question here in Colombia is being answered the other way.
Oh, really?
It
has to be the courts.
It has to be the courts. It has to be the judge.
Interesting.
I think also it has to do with the fact that the borders between public law and private law are getting messed.
Yeah.
And therefore, in Colombia, the decision is the judge has to decide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we supported the respondents in oil states, and our philosophy is, I think there's a big philosophical question sort of at the top of these questions, which is really, is a patent more an administrative, grant from the government? Is it like a license? or is it more pure property? And our view is that when you look at the way the patents are actually examined, as they say in the US, and then issued, how the sausage gets made, they say in English. I don't know if you have a similar expression in Spanish.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so, but you can understand.
That it's a very flawed, it's a very big process. It's only about 18 hours of examiner time per patent application, and then you get this 20-year ride that's really out of step with the little effort that went into it. And so the idea that the government, if a patent turns out to be very important, so there are 600,000 applications every year in the United States, and most patents never get litigated, they never amount to anything. But then there are other patents that end up being worth billions of dollars. And so the idea that the government can't come back and say, okay, this now is important, someone else has raised issues that we didn't look at the first time, let's take a second look, just from a perspective of public policy, that makes a lot of sense. And you can only oppose it if you have this big Lockean philosophy of patents as this like pure property that are like natural rights, kind of handed down by God, basically. And I guess to wrap up before the other big thing for EFF was this decision in 2014, Alice v. CLS Bank, which is the decision that says you can't get a patent on, it's about eligibility, so it's our Section 101 of the Patent Act, not obviousness, but whether something is like, you can't get a patent on a mathematical formula, or on a law of nature, or an abstract idea. And the court said that if you have an abstract idea, and the only way to apply it is to say, use a regular computer, show ads, but on a computer, or do voting, online voting, that case that EFF litigated, but on a computer, that's not eligible for a patent. And that, in the immediate aftermath of Alice, it turned out to be very powerful. The Federal Circuit did follow it and invalidated a lot of patents. And so a lot of the broader, pure, and in our view, kind of sillier software patents that really don't help the system, they were invalidated. But it's being walked back a little right now. The Federal Circuit, as it did with the KSR decision, that was from 10 years ago, sort of starts to chip away at it and slowly make it less powerful. And Alice, in sort of the medical fields and medical diagnostics and pharmaceutical patent, there's a lot of anxiety. Some say that it makes medical diagnostic patents too hard to get. I think the evidence of whether that's really discouraged investment in medical diagnostics is not very strong. The evidence on software is overwhelming that it hasn't hurt the software industry. Software investment in the United States it was like this, and now it's like this. In 2015, the year after Alice, investment in research and development software grew by 20%, and the year before, more than the year before. So there was a lot of talk before Alice that it would hurt investment in software, but that just turned out not really to be the exact opposite. But still, the people who are kind of our opponents in patent policy, who want stronger patents, easier to enforce patents, it's a big issue for them, and they have been pushing for legislative reform to undo Alice and the decision Mayo that sort of preceded Alice, that was about a medical diagnostic patent.
And how would go that? I mean, that kind of
has to be
legislative initiatives.
Yeah, it would have to be an amendment to the Patent Act. And we might make arguments that at some level, like if we lost that battle, I think you could imagine arguments that at some level, what is a patent, or what a patent eligibility has a constitutional flaw, and that in, say, software patents, you might even raise First Amendment arguments. I mean, I think that those could be challenging. I don't say too much more if we ever than that, because maybe one day we'll have to try and think about how viable they are. But where so if you go to the slide that I brought up on slide 21, this is proposed legislative language.
Okay.
So this is what the intellectual property owners organization, the IPO, which is the organization that represents pharmaceutical companies and other big patent holders, and then also the American Intellectual Property Lawyers Association. If it exists solely in the human mind. So doing something on a computer, just like
It will take us out of the human mind.
Exactly.
So it will be okay.
Exactly.
So
So math, but on a
basically,
computer.
any copyright can be patented.
Yes, I agree. It would make essentially the scope of patentability almost as and we have actually argued that in what is that this is gonna make even artistic works potentially copyrightable. But they can argue that wouldn't satisfy the useful language in Section 101. This would be a Section 101B that's changed to what already exists in Section 101. So I don't think it would make. I think it would be an exaggeration to argue that
Anything like
it would make a movie
okay.
patentable. But I think it would start to make. It would start to create. Here's a good example. Recently we had a case where we represented a young Greek man who grew up in England, who loves languages and speaks many languages and loves to teach languages. And so he has online a number of, he has a Spanish course, he has a Greek course, he has a French course, I think, all kinds of, and he offers them all for free. They're just on YouTube and on SoundCloud, and he raises money from donations. And he lives in Barcelona, basically on people's couches, and like travels around Europe giving language lessons. This is his
Way of life.
Yeah, and he got a patent threat from Stodden and Stodden. What's the name? Anyway, a big European English publisher that said it had a patent on offering language classes, recorded, not even on the internet, just recorded language classes, and the patent was on the order of the lesson that you would have. So you would have a practice student, and I would say, how do you say "let's go to lunch" in Spanish? You would answer maybe correctly or no, and if you answer incorrectly, then I would correct. And then there's a pause in the lesson so that the student, exactly, the teaching methodology, exactly, and that they have a patent on that, an issued patent, and they're threatening this guy, we very strongly that this patent is not eligible under Section 101. I think even before Mayo and Alice, this patent was not eligible under Section 101. Shame on the examiner who issued it. And also the inventor was a very famous Michel Thomas, I think, someone very famous language teacher, died a few years ago, and he had been using this method for years before he filed for a patent, and you see it in a BBC documentary that's from years before the patent. So the patent is invalid for multiple reasons. We wrote a letter back to the publisher and said, yeah, come at me, bro, to use an English colloquial expression. They never followed us. But if this law changes, I think that would pass this section. It's a teaching method. It's not in the human mind because it's on a recorded medium, and your tape is not in your head.
And if you combine it with the useful criteria, you will have copyrights under news or useful arts. You will also blur the lines between patent and design patent, right?
Yeah.
Who want a design patent if you can?
Oh, design patents have a lot of advantages in American law. Yeah, they're better law for getting damages, and they're harder to invalidate.
Okay.
Design patents are a very big growth area in America right now because there are some areas of design patent law that are better for the patent holder. But you could get both, which you're very much not supposed to be able to do. So that's kind of the big fight that's coming, and we think the Democrat, a lot of the most sensible people about patents were Republicans. It's not a very partisan area in America. It's very unusual. Most issues in America now, it's Democrats all believe this, Republicans all believe that, and they fight. All intellectual property. It's not very partisan. It's likely that the new chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House will be Jerry Nadler, and historically, Jerry Nadler has been very pro-copyright, very pro-intellectual property, pro-Hollywood. I think we're going to have a lot of work to try and teach the new members of Congress that there are two sides to this issue, and that they have to think about balance and stuff like that. So it's going to be a difficult 2019 for patent policy and copyright policy.
So if I may, because I think that basically in Colombia I only know what you just said. That is that.
Yeah, and that was my talk.
So for you that you know better, Juan Camilo, sorry, do you see this trend coming also to Colombia? Because it's going down. That's basically the only thing I know about patents. I know better copyright. I know better copyright, and even there, I like its access to knowledge. So that's the trend that we're seeing coming to Colombia.
Yeah, although here in Colombia we have our patent law is it's an Andean law, so it's for all Andean countries. Mm-hmm. And the Andean law.
Wow, that's by treaty.
Yeah, it's like a supranational treaty.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of like the EU.
The EU. It was the integration process that the Andean countries were having, but it stopped about 5 years ago.
Well, no, it's still going on, but
the process is stopped.
Oh yeah.
What we have is intellectual property, basically, as a common.
We have some issues. We have a competition law also, and some little taxes. Frontier
but the process
regulation.
is stopped, so it's very weird because you have the 90s regulations are Andean law, but the new ones are country by country because it's no longer.
Oh wow! So now you amend the Andean law?
Our main law it's still the Andean law, but the regulation, the specific regulation, it's country by country. But the thing is, it's kind of the thing that goes in Europe. But the thing is that the Andean decision on patent says that software by itself, it's not patentable.
Yes.
It says explicitly like that. But the tweaks to it.
The software with the computer.
The software with hardware. The software with hardware.
Yeah.
When you add hardware, you will have the eligibility to be patented. And I would say for the very early life of that decision, the answer to the question if software was patentable, the answer was no, because no one could actually see how hardware would give it the standard eligibility things.
What else is software for?
Yeah. But I would say 5 years ago, something like that, the standards are being coming down year by year, and we have a lot of software patents now.
Mm-hmm.
And the requirement to have hardware, it's as little as you have the software and you have to run it in a hardware. It's not like the hardware combined with the software should work to make it new and useful. So that's how it's been coming down, and I think the trend is to still coming even lower.
Yeah, in America, it was generally thought that software wasn't patented. There were some things you could call software patents as long ago as the 60s, but generally, people in Microsoft didn't apply for any patents in its first years of existence. And then in 1996, there was a decision, or was it 94? 94, 96, but in the middle of the 90s, there was this decision called In Re Allopat, and it basically held exactly that if software is being run on a processor and the processor is physical, then it is patent eligible under Section 101. And so that was the law for almost 20 years until Alice. And so a lot of the comments that we filed with the Patent Office are trying to tell the Patent Office, look, you have to be more explicit that Allopat was reversed by Alice, because it's very clear when you read Allopat that says, oh, if you just run it on a processor, it's okay. And when you read Alice, it says, if you just run on a generic computer, that is not enough, that this is a reversal. But because it wasn't Allopat on appeal, I think the Patent Office wants to pretend there's more space. And now we have a new director in the Patent Office who is very militant. He has been very, very critical of all the recent reforms. So it is. We think that he's going to be turning the spigot to have the patents come out.
That's funny thing that because here in Colombia we are like a vassal to receive everything that comes from the US, everything on intellectual property policies, but not everything that comes from the US. For example, Alice, it's never been mentioned here by anyone in the patent office or even in the governmental policy makers. And I think one of the things that we should work more is to have both sides here in Colombia speaking to, because what's been said now is you need this kind of patent growing policy because that's what's going to make the country grow economically.
Development is tied to patents.
Yeah, and even now more we have like a new. I won't call it a policy, but it's something called the orange economy here in Colombia. And it's supposedly to be like this, the creative industry policy.
And it's supported on intellectual property protection.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you melt down even a little bit, if you limit whatsoever the growing of patents, you will be messing with economic growth.
Yeah.
And what you just said about patents being issued in the growing of patents and the decision of Alice, it's a clear example of that. That not happening.
Yeah, I think the ideology of what we call maximalism in the US of you always make patents are good, copyright is good, you make them stronger, you make them better. is that is a story that for people who aren't very familiar with the issues, if you have legislators who someone comes in and says, "Oh, we'll make things better by making copyright stronger," it can be a hard thing to explain. Wait a minute, you're going to create dangers for your own creators because they're the ones going to be getting sued because they're making things, and it cuts both ways. It can be a hard story to sell. The Alice in a lot of ways turned out to be a great natural experiment, as the economists say. So the economists talk, like in macroeconomics, you can't say, all right, hi, Daniel.
It's here.
It's here. A macroeconomist who's studying they can't say, we want to see whether increasing government funding is good or bad, so we're going to make Colombia increase its funding and Peru decrease its funding and see what happens.
Okay.
Like run an experiment, you can't. But if that happens, you can compare and call it a natural experiment.
Yeah.
And so I like to tell people that Alice was a natural experiment on what happens if you weaken software patents. And the Supreme Court weakened software patents, and investment in software research and development went up.
Okay.
And so before, when Alice was at the Federal Circuit, there were judges who wrote, in one of my slides, I'll show you, Judge in...
2020.
So the Alice was at the Federal Circuit, and it went en banc, so that all of the judges of the Federal Circuit decide. Usually it's a panel of 3, and then it went to all 11 judges of the Federal Circuit. That dissented, they were, oh my God, the sky will fall, this will be so terrible. And Judge, in her dissent, she said that the Alice decision will decimate the electronics and software industries. And so, you have this natural experiment where the other side is saying this will be a disaster. The software industries, they're not going to be investment in software anymore. IBM has been saying the same thing. And it's just ridiculous. Our software investment is through the roof. Software is eating the world. Whether we want it to eat the world, it may in fact not be a good thing that it is going to eat the world. It is going to eat the world.
In general, those are the arguments in intellectual property, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's in copyright, the artists are going to starve.
Yeah.
So.
And I think so. We, I often say that if you go to sort of slide. The really basic argument on 11. 11. I mean, this is kind of stuff you all have seen before, but on software, the argument is a bit easier for us because, easier. It's not easy to win, but I think it's easy, at least for me, to convince myself, that the innovation. If it's one thing to discover the investment you need to discover that a drug has a certain effect. It's tens of millions, hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars. But the investment needed to discover that you can do voting on a computer is very, very low. And most software patents are just routine applications of computers. A computer, provably, if you ever studied some mathematical computer science, computers can provably compute, a general purpose computer can provably, you can prove that it can compute every computable function.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental theorem of computer science. And that they proved before we even had real processes. And so to me, there's something like really ridiculous about software patents, because all software patents are on doing things with computers, and we already know that you can do all kinds of things with computers, and the standard for what should be patentable on a computer, I think, should be really high. It's very rare that you see a software patent that a programmer would think, oh yeah, you'd never think you could do that. It's just, sure, if you invest some resources and have
the question is in the test part of the research.
Yeah, and there are some, and that's right, and the difficult work of software is increasingly it's not even writing the code, it's maintaining the code. The hard work, if you software companies, the work they do, almost all of the work is maintaining. It's bug fixing, it's making the code compatible with the new browser, with the new operating system. It's iterative.
Getting a new something people would like.
New features, adding just small things. It's software development is just step by step by step. It's not big invest in this one clear idea. So I think when you look at how software development is done, the patent system, which is a 19th century system, makes no sense at all and has never made any sense. But we have under TRIPS a unitary system. So I think that's why.
Not even copyright.
Yeah, I mean, I think copyright. I think a copyright. So the scope of copyright on software is hotly disputed, and whether it's just the code or the idea and structure, and whether APIs are copyrightable and there are many issues. I do think software should be copyrightable, and that your actual code, if someone simply steals your code, I am less radical than some people in the spaces that I advocate in. There are many people who just think all software should be completely open, but I think there should be fairly weak copyright protection that protects against people who are clearly just taking your code and running it.
But in an ideal world, the copyright protection should be weaker than the patent protection.
Yes.
But in practice, do you think that's true? Or, I mean, the kind of injunctions that a copyright holder has before he can trade.
I think the really big difference is not even so much in scope. The big difference is in the word copy. The reason patents cause so much trouble in software is because, and why copyright is a better model is in copyright you have to prove actual copyright. So you can't be a nobody, and this is the story of most patent trolls. They're nobodies. Nobody has ever heard of them. A lot of them are patent lawyers. They're people who aren't programmers. They're patent lawyers who learn that the system. Yeah, they know the system is weak. They know how to exploit it. So, to give you a classic example, Twitter was sued, and my old firm worked on this case when I was in private practice. And Twitter was sued by someone who had a patent on a social network, but for famous people. And because there are famous people on Twitter, this was a patent lawyer. He'd never written a line of code in his whole life. He thought of the patent while he was shopping for groceries. He wrote it in about 2 hours. And the idea that Twitter is free riding, which we would say in English, I have no idea how to say it in Spanish. It's como
Polizón.
taking advantage of.
Yeah, the word copyright is polizón. Just doesn't sound as nice as in English, so specifically.
It's ridiculous. This person has contributed nothing, but the patent system has that power because you don't have to prove that you've contributed. You only have to prove that you don't. Well, maybe no one's first, and so there's no independent invention defense where someone like that could never bring a copyright case. That's our company. And that case went to trial. That case cost millions of dollars to defend. And we won, but really ridiculous patents. So that's the biggest difference, I think. Software, the scope of software tends to be much more industry players suing each other. So it's Oracle versus Google, which is the big API case. That my firm is on that as well. But it's it's a little. Although we have been supporting Google in that case, it's not it's not as bad as some of the patent stories, because these are big companies that can look after themselves, and it's rarer that the small startups get hit by copyright suits.
So to try to close this part of the chat, can you tell us what the future looks like?
Mal. Yeah, I think in patents we will be playing defense for the next few years. We will be trying to stop Congress from abrogating, as you say, when a court overrules a decision, it's overrulable. Legislatures say abrogate. So to stop Congress abrogating Alice, that's going to be a big fight for us. And then the victories I mentioned, they've really worked. We've had less patent trolling in the past few years, and so I think there's still a lot to achieve. And I still, in the long term, we still want to do education. That this is a long, multi-decade mission of trying to explain that software patents do not make sense. We really need to rethink even TRIPS and the unitary patent system, and but there's a long-term goals. In the short term, it's more defense.
And Juan Camilo, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, thank you.
And how does the future look like for you?
I would say pretty much like the US. I mean, we are not independent in this kind of subjects. So as goes to the US or the European Union, the same goes here. So the difference will be, and there's a difference against us, is that we don't have IP litigation here in Colombia. So we have all the bad laws, all the bad policy decisions, but no one fights them in courts. There are fights that are being done in the Congress or in the public media or wherever, but not in the before judges.
So why do people file for patents if they never enforce them?
They do enforce them, but
allow
me to just say this, that my experience in copyright, and I think it happens a lot in patent, you do enforce it, but just by threatening. It's just threatening. Yeah. When you threaten, because it costs money to go, people don't want to do it, so they just end up either leaving it and I'm not going to get into there, or settling out of court. Yeah. But the main problem is, if you go to look to intellectual property decisions in Colombia, there are very few in copyright, and
in patents there is even less.
I guess, and they are mostly on the same topic.
Yeah.
That is like royalties, lots of it, because there's people willing to litigate on that, but unimportant on other issues, it's very few. So you just use that to threaten.
Yeah.
The way you enforce IP in Colombia is threatening.
Yeah, and there's much of that in the US as well.
Yeah, and there is something else in the patents area here in Colombia that I would say it's something like 90% of patents here in Colombia are foreign.
Right.
So people who file patents here in Colombia are multinationals that they just do it because, in some cases, Colombia is a market, they would say, but it's because of internal policy decision. We will patent all over the world, and Colombia is part of that. So they filed a patent here, not because they are worried because someone is infringing the patent and they will have to sue and then they need the proof.
Yeah,
because there are litigations.
And I would say also that there are other areas where this issue end up in the mind of the people, like in the academic. As long as you're measuring academics because of the patents, then you are providing a lot of social value into patents and not allowing academics and scientifics to think in other options. Because that's the Santogria, that's you know, the jewel, the best jewel that it's to get a patent, and it puts a lot of pressures in the society.
The worst thing is that those kind of patents, the patents that get a researcher in a university, for example, in whatever pharmaceuticals or engineering field, there are patents that they're not filed to be used.
Yeah,
they become, I wouldn't say like a troll, because they don't do it to sue anyone.
It's a trophy.
But they file to get points and get better salary, or whatever incentive they have within the university. But it's not
same in America for many fonts. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So we can have lunch now.
Oh, yeah.
¿Listos?